All right, I'm Cade, and this is my audience. So what I'm doing my presentation on is church culture, and the prop that I brought is my cross necklace. So growing up, I wasn't necessarily agnostic or atheist. I just didn't have an understanding or really a care for God or for Christianity and religion as a whole. So what had happened is my family had had some troubles that we were going through, and we wanted a solution. We wanted an answer for these troubles. So we started looking out and trying to find something that could help us. And what we found was Christianity. We found religion. We found church. People were going to church, and it was helping them. So we figured, why not us? So going to church, I was exposed to church culture, and I was, technically a part of it, but I didn't really feel the connection, and I didn't really have the desire that other people around me might feel. So several years later, I had been going to church for a while, and I started to find myself having disagreements, or I started, arguing, or I started having a lot of questions, and that is what leads me into my three main points and the three skills or the three things that I learned through church culture. The first one would be I learned how to have a connection with God. That was the first thing that I learned. The second one would be I learned how to ask questions and how to research to find answers for my questions. And then the third thing would be I learned how to filter out information. So first things first, I learned what it was like to have a relationship with God. I found God, and I built this connection with him through my experience within church culture, but it wasn't like how most people do it. Most people go into a church and they take everything at face value, and they take every word that the pastor says as fact. But you can't really do that, because that's not authentic, and that's not going to give you accurate results. So in my experience with my coming to God within this this time was that I started I started asking questions. I started getting more and more interested into it, and that the church culture acted as a catalyst for me to ask these questions and build my own relationship with him. But it didn't necessarily act as the whole. It wasn't like I joined a church and I became a Christian. So that leads me to my second point, which is it taught me how to ask questions and how to search for answers. So I had started disagreeing with what I was hearing while I was going to church, and I started to experience more things, and I started to grow up also, and this led me to ask more questions and search for what the actual truth was. And I found that a lot of the times I didn't agree with what somebody was saying, and it wasn't because I wanted to disagree and I wanted to rebel against Christianity or anything, but it was like I just didn't believe what they were saying. I didn't think it was true. It didn't sound logical. It didn't make sense really. And a lot of the times it was just from their perception, and it wasn't really the truth. And so I found that through researching, and I found that I didn't agree with a lot of things that modern Christianity says and what a lot of people take as fact. So I learned that I needed to ask these questions, and I started asking these questions, and that benefited me a lot. But you can't just ask questions and receive answers. You have to do what my third point talks about, and that is you have to filter out the information that you're receiving. So I had started going to all these different churches, and I tried Catholic, I tried Orthodox, I tried mega churches, I tried Protestant, Baptist, whatever. I had tried all these churches, and I had all this new information coming to my head, and I was experiencing so much that I had to learn what was true or false. And so I did this by similarly to my other point, asking questions, but I also just understood that these pastors, they're not going to be telling you the truth every single time. You have to be able to see what is true or false. And I did that by reading the Bible. I did that by watching videos. I did that by comparing thousands of different pastors, reading the same text, and seeing what their view on it was. And so this technique of filtering everything out and cross-referencing everything that you're learning really impacted me and helped me in my journey of Christianity, you could say. So throughout this experience of mine, I had understood that, okay, I do believe in God now, and I know how to ask questions. I know how to filter out information, and a lot of people struggle with that, and they don't actually, build their own deep, authentic relationship with Christ. But that is what I did, because I didn't take the church culture at face value. I let it act like a catalyst and propel me towards this final destination, but it didn't necessarily, get me there as a whole. I still had to do my own work, and I had to actually take action on things and ask questions and filter out information and accept that people aren't always going to be telling you the truth. Corruption can seep into anything, really, and people can be conniving, and people can also just be, not super wise. They sometimes don't know what they're talking about, really. So all this stuff helped me in my journey, and it taught me that, church culture can be, don't let church culture be the ceiling of your faith, but let it, like I said before, act as a catalyst and propel you towards where you want to be, and be the actual floor. So